Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Friday, March the 29th, 2024. There are three things I want to talk about today. The first thing I want to talk about is the Baltimore Bridge collision. I talked about it yesterday, I want to talk about it again. And I want to talk about it from a perspective of the heliocentric position of the planets at the time of the accident. So that is the planets from a perspective of the Sun. And there are a couple of things I've noticed that I want to talk about, and I want to consider the possibility of heliocentric transits. So I will be looking at the horoscope of the bridge when it was opened in the 70s and look at its heliocentric horoscope and see if we can find any heliocentric transits to the bridge. So that's the first thing I want to consider. Second thing I want to consider is Joe Lieberman. He was a candidate in the 2000 presidential election. He was Al Gore's running mate and he has died. I don't have a time of birth for Joe Lieberman. Nonetheless, I want to see if there's anything happening in terms of his death, what was going on when he died, and I do find some interesting stuff there. Finally, it has been announced that Robert Kennedy has a running mate, and her name is Nicole Shanahan. Now, I don't have a time of birth for Nicole Shanahan at the moment. She's born in California, so I'm guessing that the time of birth will come out pretty soon. And I want to look at her chart. It looks to me as if this announcement is not great. I think we get a feeling, don't we, that Robert Kennedy is not going to be elected president. You don't have to be an astrologer to tell us that. But this announcement doesn't strike me as good. The positions of the planets when this announcement was made doesn't make a lot of sense, and I'm wondering that this announcement is actually a sign that really this campaign of Robert Kennedy is really not going anywhere. I mean, it's going to be worse than people expect. I know a lot of people watching this video are great supporters of Robert Kennedy, but I think he made a mistake choosing Nicole Shanahan. I don't think that was a good move. I mean, I don't have a time of birth for her, but the announcement looks bad. Her chart, I don't know. I'm always a bit nervous when dealing with charts which don't have a time, but overall, I don't get a good feeling about this. But before I look at those three areas that I want to consider today, I want to look at the astrology and the I Ching for today, which is Friday, March 29th, 2024. So let's look at the chart. This is the chart for today, set for noon, New York time. You'll notice that the moon is in late Scorpio, very late Scorpio in New York. That means it's a changeover day. Moon moving from Scorpio to Sagittarius. This changeover takes place London time at 7:52 p.m. That would mean that sort of in Paris or Paris or Rome or Berlin, it would be at 8:52 p.m. When the moon moves into Scorpio, it's a change. It's an important change. The moon moves from an emotional water sign into a fire sign. There's more energy. There's more spark. The moon starts making a trine to the sun the moment it moves into Sagittarius. So this evening, it's Friday night. If you're in Europe, if you're perhaps going to a party, then things might start off as if they're going nowhere. And then suddenly things happen. The action starts. If you're in the Americas, then in New York, the moon goes into Scorpio at 3:52 p.m., sort of mid-afternoon. If you're in Los Angeles, It happens at 12:52 p.m. around lunchtime. So if you're in the Americas, a chunk of a day has the moon in Sagittarius, and overall, I think that's a good thing. So if you're in the Americas, first part of a day might feel that nothing much is going on. It's sort of gentle. Yes, there might be people to deal with, but it just feels you're waiting for something to change. And indeed, it does change with the moon moving into Sagittarius. Just prior to the moon moving into Sagittarius, the moon is making an opposition to Uranus and a trine to Venus. This is perhaps going to be more of an issue if you're outside the Americas, in Europe, Asia, Australasia. But with the moon opposition Uranus and trine Venus, it can be quite tense, moon opposition Uranus. We might feel that we need to express something and we don't know how to express it. If we want to express ourselves, it may be that someone else is going to help, because the moon is going to trine Venus. I think we're going to find people who are receptive to our message. And I suppose I should also point out the moon is trine Neptune. So if we make the effort, we can be quite sensitive. There is another aspect to consider, and that is a quintile between Mars and Jupiter. So there is Mars, 5 Pisces, there's Jupiter at 17 Taurus. So they're 72 degrees apart, Mars and Jupiter. So when you've got Mars-Jupiter quintile, some people are making a real effort to be seen and heard, putting a lot of action into whatever they're doing, a lot of energy. But it's all rather contrived. It is a quintile. Quintiles can be contrived aspects. So if you see someone being really energetic and you're wondering, how do they get that energy? It may not be the real picture. They may, to an extent, be faking it. It's about a style which possibly can't be maintained. So from our perspective, if we feel we need to get something done, sure, we can adopt an energetic and assertive style. But just remember, we're not going to be able to keep it up forever. It's perhaps about having a blast of activity that maybe allows us to accomplish quite a lot very quickly, but we're not going to be able to maintain it. Perhaps because it's just not us. It's not the real us. It's just a style, and because it's a style, because it's a facade, if anyone challenges us, we might be revealed as a paper tiger. So be careful how you assert your energy today, and don't try too hard. From a heliocentric point of view, I'm not saying that anything amazing is happening, but I do think it's so important to look at the heliocentric, the positions of the planets from a heliocentric perspective every day. This is what's going on. You can see that the Earth is at 9 Libra. Remember, heliocentric planets, this is from the Sun's perspective. It's when you put the Sun in the middle of the solar system. I wouldn't have said that there is a great deal happening, except, I should point out that Mercury is opposition Venus. Now that's interesting, because if you're used to geocentric astrology, you will know that Mercury and Venus can never be opposition each other. That is an impossibility. So with Mercury opposition Venus, we're actually looking at an aspect that we never use. But in fact, from a heliocentric perspective, Mercury and Venus can be opposition. And with Mercury opposition Venus, it's also linked up with Neptune, because they're all at 27. You see, Venus is at 27, Mercury is at 27, Neptune is at 27. That indicates to me that there may be some disruption today. people trying to be clever, Mercury opposition Venus, perhaps trying to be artistic, trying to get their talents out into the open. But Neptune is making things confusing. And also Neptune is prominent. And I think we should steer clear of water. Anything to do with water could be difficult. I know we've just had this Baltimore River accident, but water still seems to be emphasized. And I'm not convinced that this Mercury opposition Venus is going to be particularly easy. Mercury opposition Venus may be about the struggle to be creative. It's tough. We're faced with a challenge where it may be that our creative abilities are not quite in tune with the rest of the world, but at the same time, I suppose from a positive perspective, Neptune is there. So picking up on what the world is all about, on that sort of cosmic vibe, it's going to be hard work, but maybe we can do it. But perhaps we've got to be extra sensitive, though I would remind you this is a heliocentric chart. It's not very personal. It's more about the world at large. And the world at large, politicians, governments, organizations, they're not really very sure what they're doing. And so if you're in a position of authority, particularly huge authority, government minister, etc., there's a big chance that you make mistakes. That is the position that is the position of the planets for today. And I now want to look at things from a perspective of the 12 signs. So I'm going to now put the planets back in their geocentric positions, and these are my forecasts for today, which is Friday, March the 29th, 2024. Aries. On one hand, you feel that you're not getting enough attention, and perhaps you feel that that's okay. I mean, you'd like to get a bit more attention, but maybe it's better to keep a low profile, not have to tell everyone what you think. It gets quite exhausting, actually, telling everyone what you think all the time. And not having to explain yourself can be a big relief. Yet, Mars is making a quintile to Jupiter. Mars is your ruler. So with Mars making a quintile to Jupiter, Aries, you might feel that you have to make a special effort to get things done, a special effort to show how much power and energy you've got. You don't want people to forget about you. And you might think that if you do nothing, you will be ignored. So there's a pressure there, Aries, to have a style which is assertive. It's hard work, though. And you have to ask yourself, is it really worth the effort? So what I would say, Aries, is that perhaps you should have specific goals. Don't have too many goals. If there's one thing perhaps that you feel you need to done, if there's one thing that you feel you really need to do, then sure, you can put on your superhero costume and you can go and do it. But just do what's necessary. Once it's done, you can start to relax all over again. You can just go back to your little world. So perhaps at the beginning of the day, decide what your priorities are. Still, there is going to be a change when the moon moves into Sagittarius. Okay, this doesn't affect you if you're in Asia, Australia, New Zealand, because the moon is going to be pretty much in Scorpio all day. But if you are in America in particular, last half of the day, the moon is in Sagittarius. And that does create a real change. I think you still would be better off in a place where you have control, where you have a certain amount of privacy. But with the moon moving from Scorpio to Sagittarius, you are becoming more of an extrovert. You may find that you're able to get back into your swing. It's helped by the fact that the moon is moving into a fire sign, and Aries is a fire sign. So when you've got the sun in Aries, moon in Sagittarius, you feel that you're in your element. And from an emotional perspective, it's kind of easy to get things done and also to be positive. Over the last few days, some Arians have had a fairly negative view of the world. Not because anything necessarily bad has happened, but just because of the way you feel. But with the moon moving into Sagittarius, there's room to be positive. And maybe that's a note for the weekend. When you start thinking about things that you can do over the weekend, it does seem that you can accomplish quite a lot, especially from an inspirational perspective. There's also the question of other people. I would have said, Aries, that other people should be treated with a certain amount of caution. I think that there are certain individuals who are not themselves today, and they might be going in the wrong direction. They could have strange ideas, and you have to ask yourself, do you want to get involved? Because if you get too closely involved with another person, then things might go wrong, or you might waste a lot of time. I'd therefore suggest that you're as self-contained as possible, even after the moon. Even after the moon moves into Sagittarius. So that's the overall picture, Aries. It may, to an extent, be a day of two halves, or maybe not a day of two halves if you're in Europe. Most of the day, if you're in Europe, most of the day, moon in Scorpio. But just right at the end, if you're out socializing, a sudden change where you can be a lot more of an extrovert. But fundamentally, you do have to think about yourself, and I wouldn't feel pressurized to do things anyone else's way, because that person might have some very strange ideas which are almost certainly not worth following. Taurus. For much of the day, the moon is in Scorpio, your opposite sign. Indeed, if you're in Australia, New Zealand, the moon is in Scorpio for the whole day. So it's another day when you do have to consider other people and their impact on you. And I don't think that this impact need be a problem, but you may have to be a little bit flexible. Reason being that there is a opposition between the moon and Uranus. So Uranus moving through Taurus, moon opposition that Taurus moving through late Scorpio. So there are things that you take really seriously, that you're holding on to very firmly, and you want to hold on tight and you don't want to let go. But there could be a conflict situation then, a real clash of ideas and principles. It's a kind of clash that is essentially a waste of time, but still, you and other people may have a quite major difference of opinion. But if you're prepared to wait it out, the situation does improve, because what happens is the moon makes an opposition to Uranus. Then afterwards it makes a trine to Venus. Remember, Venus is your ruler. So with the moon making a trine to Venus, if you persevere and you try to be reasonable, then at some stage you're going to start to take control of the situation, and soon enough you and the other person can reach some kind of accord. Now, Moon in Scorpio is a fixed sign. It can be very stubborn, and in Western Europe, particularly, and in the Americas, the moon moves out of Scorpio, your opposite sign, and it moves into Sagittarius. When the moon moves into Sagittarius, which will happen as early as lunchtime if you're in California, when the moon moves into Sagittarius, you start to see things in a more multidimensional way. You perhaps had been tempted to see the world, and in particular people in that world, in a single way. Moon goes into Sagittarius, you start to realize that things are more complicated. Which is strange, because Scorpio is supposed to be a complicated sign. And so how can it be that when the moon moves from Scorpio to Sagittarius, things become more complicated? Well, I think that's a Taurus issue. Because from a Taurus perspective, Sagittarius is a complicated sign. For other people, it may not be such a complicated sign, but for Taurus it is. It's perhaps because Sagittarius is a mutable sign. It's going all over the place. There's a lot of action, and Taurus doesn't really know how to deal with all of that. It's just too busy, too chaotic. And the actual feeling of Moon in Sagittarius might be overwhelming to the point of thinking that, wow, it's really intense. Because of all that fire, because of all that energy, you can feel the energy and you just don't quite know how to deal with it. And it's just important that you're quite relaxed about it, that you don't panic. And it shouldn't be too much of a problem, because the moon in Sagittarius when the moon moves into Sagittarius, it's in a sign ruled by Jupiter. And Jupiter is moving through Taurus. So Jupiter is in a sign which is exalted, by which the moon rules the exaltation degree. So the moon is exalted in Taurus. So there's a comfortable relationship there between Moon and Jupiter. So in the first instance, with the moon moving into Sagittarius, there could be a sense of being overwhelmed. But I think Taurus, soon enough, you will start to be more comfortable with the situation. And I think in the end, you'll be able to take control of it. So there is no need to panic. And I think overall, Taurus, it should be an okay day. It's just the key thing, particularly if you're in the Americas, is handling that changeover from Scorpio to Taurus. Once you handle that changeover, I think you'll be fine, and that might set you up for a reasonably constructive weekend. Gemini. For much of today, Gemini, you might feel that there are things to finish off. You've kind of half done things, but not really completed them. And perhaps that's a reminder that one of the problems about being a Gemini is not finishing things. You get involved in something, and then you get distracted, and it's half finished. I mean, for me, I'm a Gemini. Half-finished books, that's a real issue. Reading a book 3/4 of the way through. In fact, some books I read them 90% of the way through, and then I stop. It's a really important book. I want to read it. I want to finish it. I just can't see it through. And I think that could be a problem today. You're nearly finished that book. I'm really annoyed. I was reading this book. I was like within 5 minutes of finishing it. I was on a plane. The last time I was on a plane, that was in 2019. The plane landed. That was it. I never finished the book, all because that plane landed 5 minutes earlier than it should have done. I still feel bad about that. So make sure, Gemini, that you finish everything off. There are things that need to be complete. If you don't finish them off now, then it may be difficult to finish them off later. Not least because on Monday, Mercury, your ruler, goes retrograde. So get it done. I know you might feel that there are more exciting things to consider, but no, it's got to be done. If you feel that you can't do it on your own, get some help. Help is available. You really just have to ask. This is especially the case from the perspective of work. So if you're working today, you're trying to do something, you don't have to do it on your own. Get a colleague to help you. If you're in a position of authority, even better, just tell someone to help you. That you'll get the assistance you need. And you certainly shouldn't think you have to do everything on your own. Now, the moon is changing sign today, and I think that could be important for Geminis. Now, the sign change is not going to affect you if you're in Asia, Australia, New Zealand. But if you're in the Americas this afternoon, the moon changes from Scorpio to Sagittarius. If you're in Western Europe, it's this evening. With this sign change comes an awareness that other people do matter, that you're not alone. And when the moon moves into Sagittarius, it immediately makes a sextile to Pluto. And so other people can be a source of transformation. And I mean that in a fairly positive way. Moon sextile Pluto. I said sextile. Sextile is a fairly fortunate aspect. It's about using constructive energy. So it does seem that you and other people can be constructive, and you can change things not in a destructive way, but in a way that is actually quite constructive. So look at the cooperation you can get. And this is a reminder that today there's plenty of scope for cooperation. I've already talked about the moon trine Venus. I've said that if you're finding it difficult to get things done, get some help. Then later in the day, it's not about getting things done. It's about being with other people to create change. And I think that's really something you can work on. But fundamentally, it's what you do have to remember, that Mercury, your ruler, is starting to go retrograde. I mean, it doesn't go retrograde until Monday, but it's slowing down now in a really big way. And you may just find that things just don't happen as quickly as you'd expected. And if you don't get things done now, okay, you might have a weekend to finally sort them out. If you don't get them done now, you're going to have to wait. You're quite probably going to have to wait 3 weeks. I'm not saying it can't be done, but you should start to prepare yourself for the idea of having to wait for 3 weeks until Mercury starts going direct again. So Gemini, there may be a certain sense of urgency. Another thing to point out is that Mercury is aspecting a rather difficult part of a rather difficult midpoint. It's starting to aspect the Mars-Saturn midpoint. So Mars-Saturn can be about negativity. It can be about fear. And it can also be about dark thoughts. And so there is a danger that Gemini, you fall into that. But maybe it's not a danger. Maybe you don't mind. Some Geminis actually quite enjoy having dark thoughts and even communicating those dark thoughts. So it's okay to have dark thoughts, provided you don't take them to heart. But some of the content of your thinking today may be, quite unusual and not the kind of thing you want to share, at least not share with strangers, because if people were to realize what you were thinking, they might judge you in a negative sense. So if you want to talk about some of your preoccupations, maybe you've seen something on the news, or you've watched a YouTube video, or you've read a book which has something sort of scary and distressing that you want to mention. You feel you just want to talk about it. Why not? But the reaction might be quite negative. So Gemini, be careful about the subject matter that you bring up, because I think that some people might not appreciate it. Cancer. The moon is your ruler, and today it changes sign. At least it changes sign if you're in Europe or the Americas. The sign change from Scorpio to Sagittarius, if you're in Europe, is in the evening, mid-evening. If you're in the Americas, it's this afternoon. And when the sign changes, you change. Your priorities change. You start to realize that maybe you need to focus on particular things that maybe you've ignored in the past, and you realize how important it is to sort them out. And I think that with this sign change, many Cancerians are going to start to have a vision about where things should be. It's a kind of vision of organization. I mean, I know that you don't normally associate organization with vision. They seem to be two very different things. But for you, I think that's okay. Just imagine how you'd like the world to be set out, and then work towards doing it, making it happen. And that's definitely something you can do. So if you feel that everything is chaotic, that there's a mess everywhere, that everything's in the wrong place, then now is a time when you can start addressing the problem. And I think that's going to be something that's going to be going on over the weekend. So perhaps the weekend starts now for you. And that's especially if you're in the Americas, Western Europe to some extent. If you're in East Asia, Australia, New Zealand, well, the moon doesn't change sign until tomorrow. In fact, not just East Asia, I said West Asia as well, the Middle East. That's more of a thing for tomorrow. But even even then, there is a sense that something is coming to an end. And from a creative perspective, if you're involved in something that's really part of who you are, part of your personality, and you're trying to sort it out, then get it done quickly. Get it done today. Make sure it's all in place. So if you are an artist and you're finishing a painting, or maybe you're writing a short story, and you've got to get it finished today, if that's at all possible. Because if you leave it until tomorrow, you might start to see things in a different way. And in fact, you could get over concerned about detail. And that's a problem, because if you are if you're involved in some creative endeavor, then sometimes right at the end, you can question your creativity. You can think, well, this isn't really very good. Of course, that perception is not true, but you might still think that something is not very good. And if you haven't finished it, or if you haven't reached a stage where it has to be finished, then you may discard it. And that could be a problem. I was just been talking to Gemini, telling Gemini to finish things off. I was doing that in a more general sense. For you, Cancer, I'm more focusing on something that is about you, something about your creative potential. So Cancer, bear that in mind. If you're involved in something that's really special to you, I would be inclined to get it done as soon as possible, and allow yourself to be inspired, especially at the beginning of the day. Inspiration is there, but inspiration is not going to last forever, because at the moment, Cancer, beginning of the day, you're in the mood to be inspired, and you're open to new possibilities. And okay, if you're in Australia, New Zealand, East Asia, not quite such a hurry. You've got all day to be inspired. But if you're further west, there's a limited time frame. So let that inspiration happen. And ideally, Cancer, you will be quickly inspired. And that way you can move forward. And don't be afraid of last-minute hitches. By last-minute hitch, you think everything's going to plan, and suddenly something happens that you just absolutely weren't expecting. And you might think that that is the end of it. It's not the end of it. Don't be melodramatic. So if there's some small explosion, what seems like an explosion, or someone overreacting, or you having an inspiration that something is useless, or which is a completely useless inspiration that something is useless. You don't need to have that inspiration. So if you get that kind of issue, don't panic. You've just got to see through it. So I would have said, Cancer, don't overreact. I think that is very important today, because if you were to overreact, you could spoil something that you're engaged in. It could just wreck something. So don't. It is very important to keep your feelings in check. Leo, as I said right at the beginning, the Sun is conjunct the Mercury-Venus midpoint. And I'm going to keep saying that. Well, I'm not going to keep saying that, because actually today is the last day that I'm going to tell you that the Sun is on the Mercury-Venus midpoint. Because it's not going to be on the Mercury-Venus midpoint much longer. It's breaking up now. It's not worth me talking about it after today. But Sun conjunct Mercury-Venus is about absolutely making the most of your abilities. Mercury-Venus is a very talented pairing in terms of art, business, sculpture, literature, whatever your number one talent is. And Sun conjunct the Mercury-Venus midpoint is really allowing you to use your special talents. But it's breaking up now. It's because Mercury is starting to slow down. In fact, it's slowing down in a big way. By Monday, it's going to be retrograde. And if you don't see it through, you could miss your chance. So today may be your last chance to really get some of your major talents out into the open in a big way. You can still get your talents out there, but it won't be quite as easy as it has been over the last few days and indeed weeks. So that is something you need to concentrate on. Also, the moon is changing sign. Now, many Leos have found it a bit difficult to engage with the world out there over the last couple of days. You've just preferred perhaps to just stay where you are. You haven't really been inclined to go out on a limb about anything. And that's okay. Perhaps there were things you needed to sort out. Perhaps you needed to just establish who you are, give yourself some security. That's great. But things are changing. The moon moving from Scorpio into Sagittarius. And this is something that's certainly happening in the Americas this afternoon. Leos do feel this sign change. If you're in Western Europe, it will happen this evening. Okay, if you're in East Asia, Australia, New Zealand, okay, not even East Asia, in fact, Middle East, in fact, all of Asia, and much of Africa, really it's an issue for tomorrow. So moon moving into Sagittarius is going to be about the moon moving into a fire sign. Sagittarius is a fire sign. Leo is a fire sign. So when moon moves into Sagittarius, you feel energized. You feel you can accomplish more, especially when the moon moves into Sagittarius. It's actually starting to make an aspect to the sun. Okay, that trine between the sun and the moon is not really going to be in play until tomorrow, Saturday, but it's still there. You can still feel it, and that aspect between the moon and the sun is going to make you feel stronger and more alive. And because you're going to be stronger, because there's more fire in the sky, that is going to allow you to accomplish more. And you're going to also be more exciting. And because if you're going to be more exciting, that means that other people are going to be more responsive to who you are and to what you've got to offer. And also, you should not be satisfied with the status quo as the moon moves into Sagittarius. As the moon moves into Sagittarius, you may straight away start to see that things can change, that you're not entirely comfortable with the way things are. You know that things could be better. And because the moon, as it moves into Sagittarius, is making a sextile to Pluto, that's about transformation. It's about taking something you're not happy with and turning it into something that you are completely happy with. And this needn't be something that you'd have to do on your own. I think you can find someone who can help you achieve what you need to achieve. In the process, though, you must be ready to have your own transformation. You shouldn't be happy with the way you are. You should consider the possibility that you could be doing a better job of things. So don't be complacent. After all, moon going into Sagittarius. Sagittarius is a mutable sign. It's a time to be flexible about what you can do and to realize that your talents, which I've been talking about quite a lot, and which I was talking about at the beginning of this piece, your talents can really be processed. Processing means change. Sagittarius, like from a tarot card perspective, I think of, what is it? It's that tarot card Temperance, where you see this angelic figure putting all this stuff into a cauldron and bringing something out, turning it into something. There's almost about some alchemical transformation that you can do over the weekend and late on Friday. So that's something to be focusing on, Leo, using the energy of the moon in Sagittarius to make some important changes in terms of yourself. It's more important to change yourself than to change the world around you. Yes, you can change the world around you, but you can't change the world around you until you first make your own changes. And those changes can only start to happen when you move out of your comfort zone. And moving out of your comfort zone is really what this movement from the moon in Scorpio through to the moon in Sagittarius is all about. Virgo, a further reminder that Mercury is slowing down in a big way. And Mercury is your ruler. On Monday, Mercury goes retrograde. So if you are engaged with something over the weekend and today, Friday, get it done. There may be a little bit of a hurry here, because if you wait too long, you might have to wait, another 3 weeks, because Mercury doesn't go direct until the end of April. So you might have to wait till the end of April to sort it out. So if you want something done, do it now, get it done now, and if not, 3 weeks, I suppose you can wait, can't you? From Friday, it's more than 3 weeks. It's more than 20. When does Mercury go direct? I should be able to tell you. Sorry about that. Mercury goes direct. Let me tell you. Mercury goes direct around the 25th of April. So consider that. That you will have to wait a long time if you don't sort it out today. Still, you should be able to get help. The moon is making a trine to Venus today, particularly early in the day. So with moon trine Venus, with Venus is moving through Pisces, your opposite sign. So if you ask, you will receive. You will get. Those that ask, get. What is it? Those that ask don't get. Those that don't ask don't want. But in your case, you ask and you will get. So don't be afraid to ask for something. But try to ask early. Don't leave it too late. If you leave it too late to ask for something, then the people who can answer your request may no longer be available. And I suppose that's maybe because it's Friday. Trying to get through to people late on Friday can be really difficult. It may be unobtainable, particularly if they're in offices. Yeah, you can. Maybe it's about asking organizations for help to help you sort something out, finish something. So try to sort that out by this morning, because late in the day things will have changed in quite a substantial way. And I should also point out that the moon is moving into Sagittarius. So depends where you are, but if you're in the Americas, the movement from Scorpio to Sagittarius happens in the afternoon. And with the moon moving into Sagittarius, Virgo, you may have to deal with a new set of circumstances and a new set of feelings. And the transition may not be entirely easy. You may feel that suddenly things are just getting more complicated. There's just a lot more to have to deal with. And you might take the view that you just don't want to be bothered. I wouldn't recommend that course of action. I don't think the moon and Sagittarius actually need be a problem, because from a Virgo perspective, Sagittarius is quite a domestically orientated sign. It's about sorting out the structure of something, the foundations of things. I know that doesn't sound very Sagittarian, but from a Virgo perspective, that's what it is about. And with the moon moving into Sagittarius, whether it happens this morning, whether it happens this afternoon if you're in the Americas, this evening if you're in Western Europe, if you're in other parts of the world, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, it will happen tomorrow. Whenever that happens, it's a time for stabilizing yourself. Maybe recently you've had some quite strong feelings about the world that need to be fleshed out. You need to actually understand what was going on. And when you have a bit of space and time on your own, then you can work them through. And I think it will occur to you that something has changed. You have become aware of a change, and it now might be a time to refigure certain things in your immediate environment. Perhaps relationships with your own family need to be changed a bit, and your relationship to your own home. So that is something that I think you do need to consider. And perhaps just take it slowly. I know there's pressure to finish things off, and I've urged you to sort things out now, because otherwise you might have to wait till the end of April. Well, maybe that's okay. You don't have to be in a hurry. It could be that there are certain things that you're involved with that you've started to become a little uncertain about, and maybe you need to just leave them alone for a few weeks. Reconsider them. Work out what role they have in your life. Think about them. It could take 3 weeks to really decide what you want to do next. And you may find that if you wait 3 weeks, you may have changed your mind about some very important matters. And when you look at a problem or a task you're engaged with in a different way in 3 weeks' time, you might see something completely different, and you may decide that a complete change of strategy is required, and you shouldn't feel bad about that. You need to just use the planetary energies to help you make the right decision. So perhaps you shouldn't be so impatient. And I know Mercury is in Aries, and with Mercury in Aries, that does encourage Virgos to feel that they're in a hurry. But maybe you need to calm down. 3 weeks isn't so long, so that might be something you need to consider. And really, Virgo, that's about it. I think it can be an okay Friday, provided you're not in too much of a hurry. If there's something if there's something that's difficult that needs to be sorted out immediately, then get some help. But I think that help will be available, especially at the beginning of the day. Just don't leave it too late, because otherwise I don't think that help is going to be so easy to find. Libra, you're starting to change a bit. A lot of people are changing a bit today. I think that's part of the realization that Mercury is moving very, very slowly right now, and on Monday it goes retrograde. That could be relevant for you, because Mercury is moving through Aries, which is your opposite sign, moving very, very slowly through your opposite sign, about to go retrograde. So in terms of the changes that you may be experiencing, you may be starting to see that some people are changing their mind. They're not as certain about things as they used to be. And in a couple of days' time, they might have an outright change of mind. So if you want a decision from someone, then you could say, well, get the decision. Make sure they tell you now. Get them to sign on a dotted line now, because on Monday they might not be prepared to do so. But would that be such a good idea? If someone is going to change their mind, why get a decision out of them? Someone may make a decision. It might be a very clear decision, but this decision is built on nothing. Circumstances change. So maybe you shouldn't be in such a hurry to get decisions out of people. I also think that you need to be in a little bit of a hurry, though, when it comes to making connections. Because at the beginning of the day, especially if you're in the Americas, the moon is making a trine to Venus. Okay, if you're in Europe, and particularly Asia, Australia, New Zealand, that trine between the moon and Venus is going to be around pretty much all day long. But this moon trine Venus is about you interacting with the world. You know, Venus is your ruler. The moon is trine Venus. It's about talking to people, getting people's opinions about serious subjects that may be related to money, business, routine stuff. Might sound a bit tedious, but the lines of communication are open at the beginning of the day. Later in the day, those lines of communication are not going to be open. So if there's something that needs to be sorted out, particularly of a material and mundane nature, then I would recommend that you sort it out now, rather than leave it until later, which realistically means leaving it until next week. And Libra, you don't really want to leave that kind of thing until next week, because next week, as I've been telling everyone, Mercury is moving retrograde. That Mercury, which is moving through Aries, your opposite sign, is going to be going backwards. And so people that were available or are available right now may not be available on Monday and next week. They may be difficult to get hold of. They may delay. They may not answer the phone. They may go on holiday. Whatever. So if something is of administrative and bureaucratic stuff, that needs to be sorted out. The sooner the better. And that's possibly the main thing going on, though the moon does change signs, and this sign change, Libra, is going to have an impact on you. I think actually it could be quite a fortunate impact, because the moon moves from Scorpio into Sagittarius, and from a Libran perspective, Sagittarius is all about the free flow of communication. And this sign change, which takes place this afternoon if you're in the Americas, this evening if you're in Western Europe, allows you, in a general sense, to communicate better. But I mean, I'm talking about something very separate when I talked about not being able to get in touch with people. But you should get in touch with people this morning, because otherwise you might have to wait until, I don't know, you might have to wait weeks. That was more about administrative matters, contacting bureaucrats. But when it comes to friends, amusement, communication of that nature, then I don't think it's such a problem. And I do think that later in the day, if we're in the Americas or Europe, there should be good lines of communication. And in fact, Libra, there's scope for having fun, and having fun in quite a profound way. After all, when the moon moves into Sagittarius, it makes a sextile to Pluto, and Pluto is in Aquarius, which is a very Libran-friendly sign. So moon sextile Pluto may allow you to get involved in something which is powerful and uplifting, but at the same time isn't dangerous, because moon is sextile Pluto. Okay, if moon was square Pluto, that might there might be a bit of caution required, but this is sextile Pluto, so there can be some uplifting experiences with other people. And maybe if you're in the Americas or Western Europe, maybe this evening is a good time to go to a party or something like that. Meet people you know and like, and if they're also interesting people, then so much the better. After all, when the moon moves into Sagittarius, it starts making a trine to the sun, and the sun is in Aries, which is your opposite sign, and that is useful for relationships, getting close to people. And it's not just about Friday, it's also about tomorrow. In fact, the sextile, the trine between the moon and the sun is exact tomorrow, Saturday. So that may be all about what's happening not just Friday, but Saturday, even into Sunday. And so if you're in Australia and New Zealand, don't worry. The moon does go into Sagittarius tomorrow, Saturday, and then you will be able to take full advantage of it. Scorpio. The moon is moving through the last degrees of your sign. The moon does have to go through Scorpio every single month, and with the moon moving through Scorpio, you have felt that you are broadly in control of things. After all, if you're a Scorpio, you know what it's like to have those Scorpio feelings, and so you feel comfortable. But inevitably, the moon must leave Scorpio. If you're in Asia, Australia, New Zealand, okay, the moon doesn't move out of Scorpio until tomorrow. But in the Americas, moon moves out of your sign this afternoon. If you're in Western Europe, it happens this evening, and this might actually be something of a relief. You may feel that there's a bit less pressure on you. There's not so much you have to do. You can more be yourself, and you can more sort of perhaps observe and watch. You will also have a clearer idea about what you need. It's one thing being a Scorpio, but it's another thing thinking about all the things you need to sustain being a Scorpio. Yeah, Scorpios need to be sustained. And so with the moon moving into Sagittarius, you have a clear idea about what is required for self-sustenance. And that might start a process of preparation. Thinking about what you haven't got. There are always things you haven't got. In Scorpio, one word that is often associated with the sign Scorpio is desire. And if there's something you want and you haven't got it, you can feel it. And so what are those things that you feel that you want? Perhaps you should make a list. The thing you want the most. And I'm thinking actually of quite material things. I'm not talking about abstract concepts like love and happiness. Think about material things that you want. And I think that you can actually find ways of getting them. That is how the Scorpio desire comes into play. And don't underestimate yourself in terms of what impact you're having on the world around you. Now, you might take the view that when the moon leaves Scorpio, that in some way your charisma will diminish, that you might not be the center of attention so much. Okay, you might not be the center of attention so much, but I don't think your charisma is going to diminish. I think that today, Scorpio, you're going to be actually quite charming and enticing, and you will know how to bring people into your web. You will know what words to say. And I think that if you want to bring people together, I think you're going to be able to do that extremely well. And from a community perspective, you're going to be able to network very effectively. So if that's important to you, creating networks of people, may not be networks, maybe just one person. If you want to tell someone why they should cooperate with you, for whatever reason, then actually now might be the time to tell them. You'll be able to be very convincing, and you will come over in a way that is not just charismatic, but is also powerful. So look at that opportunity and consider how you might be able to use your charisma. And I suppose that goes back to desire, doesn't it? Yes, there are things that Scorpio wants, and in many cases, if it's something you want, you need someone else's cooperation. And because of the charisma you have today, I think you'll be able to get that cooperation. Having said that, you need to be a little patient. There's some danger, especially at the beginning of the day, with the moon opposition Uranus, that you are a little bit impulsive. This is especially the case if you're in Asia, Australia, New Zealand. Perhaps not such an issue if you're in the Americas. But there's maybe a certain amount of impulsiveness. You want something done quickly, and the people you're engaging with, they're not ready to move at the speed you want to move. And so you move too quickly, and then what happens is you get a deadlock situation, and nothing gets done. I really would therefore suggest that you are patient. If the moment you feel resistance, back off. And you're a Scorpio. You are very sensitive. You can feel resistance before it even happens. And so there'll be plenty of warning. So I don't think that this moon opposition Uranus at the beginning of the day need be a problem. It's just only a problem if you ignore it. And it shouldn't take away from the fact that if you get your timing right, today you can be very charismatic and you can persuade people to give you what you want. Sagittarius. The moon is moving into your sign today. Okay, it might be tomorrow if you're in Asia or Australia or New Zealand, but overall the moon is about to move into your sign. And if you're in the Americas, it moves into your sign this afternoon. As early as lunchtime if you're in California, if you're on the West Coast. And I think that is something to be welcomed. You've had Moon and Scorpio for a few days. And, from a Sagittarian perspective, Moon and Scorpio perhaps hasn't been great. Moon and Scorpio is just too introspective. It's so un-Sagittarius. Sagittarius is all about action. It's about flexibility. It's about moving from place to place. And Scorpio just wants to stay in one place. It can be like mud. No offense to Scorpios. But then this is a reading for Sagittarius, so everything is subjective. It's relative for Sagittarius, and perhaps I'm just saying that to make Sagittarians feel better. But yes, Sagittarius, it's a favourable change, and you are going to be much more yourself, and it's going to be just so much easier to express yourself. And with the moon moving into Sagittarius, you're going to have a lot of power at your disposal. After all, when the moon moves into Sagittarius, it makes a sextile to Pluto. Pluto is about power. It's about getting noticed. It's about being able to change the landscape to suit your purposes. And so that is something you can do. Change happens quickly, and that can happen. And you have to work out how best to create that change. I think the power of the spoken word should not be underestimated. One conversation can give you pretty much everything you need. But in certain cases, Sagittarius, it may be necessary to pay someone a visit. Just a quick visit, 5-minute visit, is all it takes. You being there in person. You take the short journey, you're there in person, and immediately you have a powerful influence. And I think, Sagittarius, it's going to therefore be very important that you don't underestimate yourself, because today you are strong. I think tomorrow you're strong as well, but today you're able to impose the full power of your personality. As soon as you get someone's attention, and maybe The issue is getting someone's attention. That may take a bit of time, but once you're there, whether it's on the phone, whether it's face-to-face, once you're there, then you're going to be really difficult to ignore. And whatever you say is going to carry an enormous amount of weight. And you should not be put off by what other people are saying. Some people may come up with all sorts of reasons why they can't do what you want them to do, or why your plans aren't achievable. Now, it's possible that some of these reasons are actually quite good reasons, but other reasons are going to come from a very strange place, and they may seem to reflect, I don't know, some kind of weird fear. People thinking about the worst possible things that can happen. Well, Sagittarius, you are in a good position to put people's minds at ease. You have a compulsive but positive view of the world, and if you keep pushing that view of the world, I'm confident that everyone around you is going to accept that your way of looking at things is the right way of looking at things. Capricorn, you are in a process of change. You're feeling that things are perhaps getting a bit too much, and that you somehow need to slow things down. And I think that is absolutely reasonable. I think you are perhaps realizing that Mercury is about to go retrograde. Even if you don't conceptualize it as Mercury, a planet going retrograde, even if you don't conceptualize it like that, you may still think that if it hasn't been done now, then it won't get done. And you would be right on that score. So Monday, Mercury goes retrograde. Now it's slowing down. You can feel the fact that it's slowing down. And you possibly are of the opinion that at this stage, there's not really much point in doing anything. If you were to start something now, well, what's the point? You would just have to start again at a later stage. So you're certainly being very realistic there, and I think that is absolutely reasonable. But before everything completely slows down, you still have some work to do. I think that there are still a few connections to be made, especially at the beginning of the day. At the beginning of the day, the moon makes a trine to Venus. And with the moon making a trine to Venus, I think that is a time when you need to make sure that your connections with another person are all in good order. Perhaps there's someone who you feel you need this person, maybe not immediately, but still you want to have them around. And you might also be concerned that you and this person might drift apart. I mean, think about it. Think about some of the important relationships in your life and think about how fluid they are. Because some relationships could just drift off, especially Mercury goes retrograde on Monday. So if a relationship is important to you and you're looking ahead over the next few months, then maybe you need to do something to make sure it's all in order. Just call someone. Show them that you're ready to talk to them. Won't take long, but it could be something you could be doing something that is really very useful and is stabilizing, and you need to keep people on board. And so, yes, at the beginning of the day, that's certainly something you can do. If you leave it later from that, you wait until the end of the day, then you probably won't be in the mood, especially if you're in the Americas, because when the moon moves into Sagittarius, that does create a change. From a Capricorn perspective, Sagittarius is quite an introspective sign. And you might just feel, yeah, what's the point? You just won't be in the mood. And you do have to be in the mood. Although, even if you're not in the mood, I actually think that you're quite a powerful person at the moment. But you don't seem to fully recognize it. If you were to assert your power, then I think that through the assertion of your power, you would get really good results. But do you want to assert your power? That is a question for you. In terms of asserting your power, not everyone will appreciate it. If Capricorn telling everyone what to do, Capricorn saying how they want the world to be, yeah, not everyone will appreciate it. And you have to consider the situation. If the situation is non-urgent, then obviously it's not important to assert your power. You might just take the view, yeah, you've got the power, but so what? You've always got the power, and you can leave the power for another day. But if it is urgent, and if something needs to be done right this moment, you might not feel like it, but you know something needs to be done, then you can quickly intervene and make things happen in a big way. And most importantly, you can get people to sit up and take notice of you. Aquarius. I've been saying to other signs that the moon is moving from Scorpio to Sagittarius. I think it's kind of appropriate that the moon is moving from Scorpio to Sagittarius on a Friday, at least for you. Friday for many people is the end of the working week, and I think that over the last few days you have been quite focused on your ambitions, what you'd like to happen in the future, and things are changing. The ambitions are changing. You realize that ambition on its own is not enough. I mean, what are ambitions about? What is the actual reason for having an ambition? I know that society tells us that we should have ambitions, but why? What is the purpose? And I think that is something, Aquarius, that you're going to be thinking about, particularly later in the day as the moon moves into Sagittarius. Okay, it could be tomorrow if you're in Asia, Australia, New Zealand, but thinking about what it's all about. And when the moon moves into Sagittarius, it makes a sextile to Pluto. And Pluto is at the beginning of your sign, and in January Pluto moved into Aquarius. Now the moon is making a sextile to Pluto, and it may occur to you that yes, there are things you can do. It will occur to you that an idea about the future that seemed a fantasy can actually become a reality. But it can't become a reality if you just let things stay the same forever. No, you have to make a change. So what is that change? I think it's actually seriously looking about what you'd like the future to look like. We all have fantasies about what the future should be like, but what about actually putting it into reality? we're talking about from a traditional perspective, because from a traditional perspective, the moon is moving into your 11th house. That, because from an Aquarius perspective, Sagittarius is the 11th house, and so moon moving into the 11th house in the jargon. The 11th house is sometimes called the house of hopes and wishes, and with the moon moving into Sagittarius, the emphasis is on your hopes and wishes, but it shouldn't be in a sort of a fuzzy way. It should be about, what are your hopes? What are your wishes? Because they can be realized in the real world if you have the imagination. And that's really all it takes, is imagination. And once you've got the imagination, you have to have the self-confidence to make it happen. In the process, you might have to be tough and resilient, but Aquarius is a fixed sign, and once it's made its mind up about something, then in many cases nothing can stop it. So what I'm saying about today is it's more of a long-term thing. Don't just think about what you want to do today, because I think ultimately you're not really interested. It's just a bit tedious if you focus on a complete short-term day-to-day stuff. And even if you're working today, I think you will take the view end of the week that you've pretty much done everything you need to do. There may be a couple of people you need to talk to in the morning, but aside from that, I think you can allow yourself to think about bigger things. That's okay. And when you start thinking about bigger things, you need to be ready to make some kind of a resolution. Pisces, you are realizing that you've made up your mind about a few things, and that you're now ready to put theory into practice. And it's hard work reaching that stage about putting theory into practice, especially if you're a Pisces. I mean, Pisces can go all over the place. They can be distracted by this, they can be distracted by that, and they can have changes of mind. That is the nature of being a Pisces. Like a shoal of fish suddenly moving in one direction, another direction, always having to be on move just in case there are predators. But you're ready, I think, to clearly make up your mind. And you are helped by the moon moving into Sagittarius, which happens this afternoon if you're in the Americas, this evening if you're in Europe, tomorrow if you're in Asia, Australia, New Zealand. So there is a sudden sense of resolution. Now, what do you do with a resolution at a time like this, when you have decided that there's something you really want to do? I think it's very important that you don't think about it in a short-term sense, that you at least look, say, a month ahead. The moon is going into Sagittarius, so it will next go into Sagittarius in about a month's time. In fact, to be clear, let me just tell you precisely when the moon goes into Sagittarius next, or reasonably precisely. The moon will go into Sagittarius next on around the 26th of April. So think about this next month. Moon from Sagittarius to Sagittarius between now and the 26th of April You may make decisions now which are very clear, which are very positive, but you may not have the opportunity to actually act on those decisions until the moon goes into Sagittarius again in the last week of April, April 26. And I think that part of the problem might be the fact that Mercury is about to go retrograde. Mercury goes retrograde on Monday, and this retrograde motion could affect you in a couple of ways. It may have a financial implication. You may already be feeling it. Mercury is starting to slow down in Aries. And, from a Pisces perspective, the sign Aries is very much connected with money. And you may feel that money is just not quite as fast as it used to be. And over the next few weeks, you may look at your financial situation and you may have pause for thought, and you may feel something needs to be addressed. And this might prevent you from doing things you'd like to do right now as quickly as you would like to do them. That's what I mean by the delay until the last week of April. So if you have a realization today, just write it down. Okay, sure, work towards it if you can, but I'm just saying that there is work to be done. It could be distractions, and you shouldn't be put off by short-term turbulence. It's just not going to last forever, and probably a lot of it is going to be connected with Mercury retrograde. Still, with the moon moving into Sagittarius, I know you may not feel the full benefits until the moon next moves into Sagittarius, but still, it does force you to focus on your ambitions. And I think that as you move into the weekend, this will become clear that there are things you want to do, and you might be in a bit of a hurry. And I think you're going to realize that perhaps on Saturday when the moon starts making a square to Mars. I'll be talking about that square between the moon and Mars tomorrow when I talk about the weekend. When I talk about the weekend horoscopes, but you may be starting to feel it. It is that sense of impatience that something needs to happen, and just relaxing over the weekend, I don't think that's going to be what you're into. And I think, as early as Friday afternoon, you're almost going to feel that you're not really ready for the week to end. You might almost feel like on Friday that the week is just starting. And the idea of having to just spend a weekend doing nothing is not going to be very appealing. Another thing about Mercury going retrograde, or at least slowing down, is you might be starting to see other people change. People are not going to be as fast as they used to be. They're not going to be as decisive as they used to be. And you might feel impatient. You might be really annoyed that someone is just holding back. But it's not their fault. It's just to do with Mercury, and it's to do with your perception of them. Because Mercury represents other people for you, represents your perception of other people. And so if someone is being slow and is taking their time to make up their mind, then rather than get annoyed, you should try to understand their perspective. They do have a unique perspective, and they do have reasons. So, don't be in too much of a hurry to get decisions from people, and don't get annoyed if you feel they're slowing you down. You do have to be patient. Those are my readings for the 12 signs, and I'm now going to look at today from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is Friday going to be like for those watching the I Ching segment of this video? And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 37, the family. The Wilhelm translation puts the clan in parentheses after the family. And this tells us that today a lot of the emphasis is going to be on our family or on our grouping. It depends who we are. We're all members of something. It could be a clan, it could be a family. I don't think many gang members are watching this video, but if you're a gang member, then it could be about the gang that you are a member of. It's going to be important, and that social structure of the family is telling us that everyone needs to be aware of their place. We need to remember that the I Ching is a Confucian oracle. The underlying philosophy of the I Ching, as it comes from China, is Confucian. There is a natural order. That order is based on the family, and society should reflect the family. And people have their place. Of course, from a traditional Confucian perspective, women are supposed to have their place. Husband, wife, number one son, number two son, number one daughter, all that kind of stuff. But I don't want to get into the gender aspects of the family. It's just that if everyone knows their place, then things are going to work out. And I think it's important to be in control. There are some moving lines here. There are actually 4 moving lines. So because there are 4 moving lines, it does seem that there is actually quite a lot of activity going on in your family or in your clan or perhaps your gang, whatever that prime grouping that you are a member of. And control is really important. And there is a suggestion here that there could be a problem. Not a big problem, but the third line is moving. Third line from the bottom is moving. And in the I Ching, the third line from the bottom is often unfortunate, and it is suggestive of a problem within the family. Not a big problem, but perhaps a problem of authority or someone behaving as they shouldn't be behaving. And you have to work out how to deal with it, or indeed how to forestall it. And the I Ching talks about the difference between being too strict and being too lenient. And the I Ching makes a valuable observation here, that if we have a regime which is very strict, then we can relax that regime and make it less strict. And maybe that is appropriate. We can start off assuming the worst, have a strict regime, and if everything's okay, we can relax it. On the other hand, if we have a regime that is too lenient, we can't suddenly strengthen it. It doesn't work like that. People get used to leniency. And as soon as you try to strengthen that system, there is rebellion, complaints, and so forth. So it's better to start off being very strict than to be very lenient. Of course, it's not good to be very strict or to be very lenient. But if you have a choice, it's better to be too strict than to be too lenient. And that is, of course, the Confucian philosophy coming through here. And perhaps that relates to how you deal with your family and this kind of structure you're creating. Because there is a problem coming up, and that problem is going to be so much easier to deal with if you start with a strict regime where there is control. If you have a lenient regime and there's a problem, all sorts of things can happen. But when I talk about problem, I'm not talking about anything major. And the final line moves, and that suggests to me that this situation can be resolved in the family, and I think the family unit can basically be upheld. People do need a bit of discipline, and people also need to understand who is the leader, who is in control, and I think that should work out well. And this hexagram does move, and it moves to hexagram number 51. I've called this hexagram Thunderbolts because I've taken the line of Greg Winkup. The Wilhelm translation calls it the arousing, whereas Greg Winkup calls it Thunderbolts. I think the Thunderbolts is probably better. It's telling us that we're trying to organize something. I've talked about the family, and we're trying to create some structure in our family, and also trying to deal with a temporary problem, some problem that's come up. And then something happens, and at first sight it seems to be really disastrous, thunderbolts. But the I Ching tells us that the sacrificial spoon doesn't spill whatever is being sacrificed. I think it's incense or whatever. So if you keep your cool, that's like you're about to, put some incense on the fire, and there's a shock, but you don't spill any incense. And that's really saying that it's not such a big thing when this shock happens. Our first impulse is, what's happened? It's terrible. But really, actually, nothing much has happened. We can deal with it. So don't be upset if there is a sudden shock today. It could happen, but it really isn't the end of the world. And if we keep our cool, it'll subside, the shock waves will pass off, and no damage will be done. Now I'm going to go back to the astrology. And so there are three things I wanted to talk about today. And the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to go back to the Baltimore Bridge. And I wanted to consider the Baltimore Bridge from a purely heliocentric perspective. In other words, from a perspective of the sun at the center of the solar system. And I would remind you that heliocentric ephemerides are available on astro.com in their ephemeris section. So I'm not talking about anything you don't have access to. I mean, I know I have a computer program that works out the heliocentric positions, but on astro.com, the heliocentric, just look at, Google astro.com and then ephemeris, and you'll be able to get heliocentric ephemerides for whatever year you want. And here is the Baltimore Bridge. So the Baltimore Bridge, this is a Baltimore Bridge. It was opened on March the 23rd, 1977. But this is the Baltimore Bridge from a heliocentric perspective, from the perspective of the sun being in the middle of the solar system, as it really is. And the Baltimore Bridge has quite a difficult heliocentric T-square. It's got Mars opposition Saturn. So Mars opposition Saturn can be about death, it can be about destruction, it can be about frustration. I don't know what the experience of people in Baltimore was to the bridge. did it cause problems? Was it always a lot of traffic and frustration? Mars Saturn, I suppose Mars Saturn isn't just about death. It's about being crazy, waiting in a traffic jam. But there's that Mars Saturn opposition. There is the potential for disaster in that bridge, especially as Uranus is connected to it. So there's Uranus making a wide square to Saturn, making a wide square to Mars, and we could say that Mars is sort of sesquiquadrate the Saturn-Uranus midpoint. So I think overall you can see that the Baltimore Bridge has some issues here. And then what I want to do is I want to compare the Baltimore Bridge heliocentric chart to the Baltimore Bridge to the actual time of the accident. So here is the bi-wheel. On the outer wheel, I have the positions of the planets when the actual collision happened. On the inner wheel is a chart of the Baltimore Bridge. And you can see that, was it last Tuesday? When was it? That Mercury was completely opposition Mars at the time of that accident. I mean, exactly, almost. Mars, heliocentric Mars was at 9:15 Aquarius, and heliocentric Mercury was at 9:29 Leo. So an exact Mars-Mercury opposition. And that Mars-Mercury opposition was exactly on the bridge's Uranus. So when the bridge opened, Uranus was at 9:17 Scorpio. And there we have Mercury at 9, transiting Mercury at 9:29 Leo, transiting Mars at 9:15 Aquarius. So Mars and Mercury were hitting the bridge's Uranus. And Mercury was only 6 degrees from the bridge's Saturn, and Mars was coming up. We were coming up to a heliocentric Mars return there with the bridge. Remember what I said, that from a geocentric point of view, the bridge collision happened exactly on a Mars return. The heliocentric Mars is quite close to the geocentric Mars, but not exactly there. But we get a situation where the theme is kind of repeated. So there you have it. I think that's pretty good. So we have a heliocentric exact Mercury-Mars opposition at the time of the crash, and this heliocentric Mercury-Mars opposition hits the heliocentric T-square that existed when the bridge was open, when Mars was opposition Saturn and square Uranus. So I just wanted to show you that, to just demonstrate that maybe when we look at transits and charts, perhaps particularly for things like bridges, we shouldn't restrict ourselves to the geocentric positions. We should also consider the heliocentric positions. And I must emphasize, you can find this out using heliocentric ephemerides which are available. Of course, ideally you would purchase a computer program like this, but I don't know how much this program is. I think it's something like $300 ideally. But if you're not ready to buy a computer program to give you the heliocentric positions, then yes, the information is available. So that is the bridge. Now I want to look at the horoscope of Joe Lieberman. Joe Lieberman was Al Gore's running mate, and in the 2000 election, the Democrats actually got more votes than the Republicans. Nonetheless, because of all that stuff going on in Florida, George Bush Jr. won, and that's why Joe Lieberman never became vice president. I do not have Joe Lieberman's time of birth, but I do have his date of birth. So Joe Lieberman was born on February the 24th, 1942. Yeah, we don't have a time of birth. Never trust a politician if you don't have their time of birth. Never. Doesn't matter who else. If you at least, doesn't matter what you think of them. Never vote for a politician if you don't know their time of birth. So perhaps that's why he lost. People just, or why he should have lost. I mean, you don't know. I mean, how can you trust someone if you don't know the time of birth? It's just ridiculous. But anyway, that is Joe Lieberman's chart, and I notice that he has the sun at 5 degrees Pisces. Now, he died on March the 27th. So there was a full moon on February the 24th, just over a month before he died. And that full moon was at 5:23 Virgo. So we don't know exactly where his sun is, but he did have a full moon right across his sun just before he died. I believe he had a fall, went to hospital, and then he died. So it would seem that this full moon was really quite difficult for him and did presage his death. Now, I don't have his time of birth. You can't really get into details about death and when someone dies if you don't have their time of birth. And as far as his death is concerned, here's a chart of his death. So we had the full moon. So he had a full moon across his sun, hitting his sun, which was just over a month before he died. I assume that was the full moon preceding his fall, but I don't know when he had that fall. But it does illustrate the fact that the influence of a full moon can last for quite a long time. Additionally, Mars, when he died, was at 358 or something. So Mars was a couple of degrees off his sun. Now, you could say, well, that's quite a long way off, 2 degrees. But perhaps what happened was that the full moon energized that point, okay, in perhaps a negative way, and that's what killed him. Saturn was conjunct his south node, so he had Mars conjunct his, so he had a wide Sun south node conjunction. So Saturn hitting his node pretty exactly seemed to coincide with his death at a time when Mars was conjunct his Sun. So Saturn hitting his nodes, you could say, well, the node could be a meeting. Saturn could be a meeting with death. Alternatively, the nodes could be about karma, reincarnation, what's time for him to move on to a new challenge. And so that is Saturn hitting his south node. He was approaching his Uranus return, but he didn't make his Uranus return. He has Uranus on Algol, but I wouldn't, fairly close to Algol, but I wouldn't worry about it too much. I wouldn't have said that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction was particularly involved in what was going on. Yes, he had a Mars-Saturn conjunction in his chart, but we've all got to die at some stage. I mean, he died at 81, which is not, it's not terrible. 81, was he Joe Lieberman, or was he 82? 82. I mean, 82 is not a bad age, but I suppose now people are living longer. So Mars-Saturn, I'm not convinced that Mars-Saturn is particularly involved in his death, even though he had a Mars-Saturn conjunction in his chart. Finally, I want to look at his solar arc directions. So solar arc directions is when you move everything by 1 degree for every year of life. So we would move the planets in his chart by around 82 degrees. So if we look at Lieberman's Joe Lieberman's solar arc direction. So these are his solar arc directed planets. So he was born on February So this is for May. So he's born on February the 24th. So this moves the Sun up through to May the 17th, but it's not secondary. So everything is actually moved by the same thing by 82 degrees. So let's just look at, on the outer wheel, we've got the positions of the planets, the directed positions when he died. And what I notice quite clearly is the solar arc directed Sun, which is the same as the solar arc secondary progressed Sun. His solar arc secondary progressed Sun was at 2611 Taurus. So in fact, in this case, it has directed onto Algol. And he has Uranus on Algol, so I kind of misspoke saying that Algol didn't matter. Sun directed onto his Uranus, and that's when he had his fall, and that's when he died. Now, that doesn't always happen like that, but that seems to be pretty simple. Directed Sun on his Uranus, he had a fall, he died, and directed Sun was also on Algol. So I think there are some indicators of why he died when he died, even though I don't have his time of birth. Finally, I want to look at the horoscope of Robert Kennedy in light of him making a vice presidential pick. I don't want to spend a long time on Robert Kennedy, but here is his chart. And so he's standing to be vice president. I know a lot of people watching this have been very excited about Robert Kennedy. I mean, he seems to be someone who one might want as president. Former environmental lawyer, and he's kind of asked questions that other people are not asking. He's not part of the sort of uniparty blob. And so, yes, I can understand why people might want him to be President of the United States. But I'm not convinced. I haven't asked Dahori, but if we look at his announcement, I think this was when he announced that he was going to be a candidate. I think he announced on April the 5th, 2023. And he announced his candidature with just before a full moon. This is not a good time to announce you're going to be a candidate, is it? There's the moon in Libra, going to an opposition of the Sun. I don't think this is a good time to be saying that you want to be a candidate. So that's the first thing. And now he chooses Nicole Shanahan. Now, astrology aside, I would have thought that was not a good choice. Someone from California, someone who is... I mean, there's nothing wrong with being from California, but someone who's just into all that stuff, she's into all the tech stuff, she's all, I don't know, very much part of a world that seems to be divorced from the sort of the world and its problems. Someone who is rich and privileged and doesn't seem to have sort of got her hands dirty. I mean, ideally, he'd want to choose someone who would appeal to white working class people in the Lake States in Ohio, not choose someone like her. But let's just look at her chart. She was born on September the 16th, 1985. Which makes her a Virgo. She's a very clever woman. She was, she was a lawyer, patent lawyer. She's been, I think she was married to one of the founders of Google. She's been associated with Elon Musk. So very well connected, and that might be a good reason why Robert Kennedy might want to choose her. And of course, she's a former Democrat. She's had a progressive reputation, and so maybe she's a good person to appeal to progressives. I don't think she's the kind of person that's going to appeal to the sort of person that might want to vote for Trump. But there's just something about that Virgo, Sun, Mercury, Mars in Virgo. there seems to be a certain lack of spark there. I know she's got Venus in Leo. I mean, she has got fire in her chart, but with those Virgo planets, I don't. It shows perhaps her intelligence, Mercury in Virgo. Although it should be noted that she's got Mercury conjunct the Sun. I don't know what house this is in. I don't have a time of birth for her. All I know, she's born in September the 16th, 1985, in, I think, Placer County. I've said Auburn, California, but I think that's the county seat of Placer County. I don't know where precisely she was born. It doesn't matter because I'm not using a time of birth. So she's got Mercury in Virgo, is conjunct Sun. I mean, clearly details are important to her. Mars in Virgo, that's... but everything has to be controlled, everything in order. She's got Mars trine Neptune. Mars trine Neptune might be all the causes she's interested in, having a fuzzy view of the world, but it's Neptune in Capricorn. Neptune in Capricorn, I suppose it defines a generation, but Neptune in Capricorn, one always wonders how Neptune in Capricorn is actually working, because Neptune is all about transcending, going beyond yourself. But in Neptune in Capricorn, how do you actually do that? Because Capricorn is about the earth. It's very materialistic. I think, someone like Taylor Swift, she has Neptune in Capricorn. She's part of that generation, appealing to a wider group of people. But there's always some money that's involved. You've always got to think about the money, haven't you, with Neptune in Capricorn? And so Neptune, in a way, doesn't kind of work. So Mars trine Neptune, putting energy into causes, but also sort of thinking about yourself and your own agenda at the same time. I think that's a problem about Mars trine Neptune in Capricorn. I'm probably going to get a lot of comments from the Neptune in Capricorn generation about my negativity towards Neptune in Capricorn. Oh, she's got Chiron opposition Uranus, trying to be the rebel, perhaps. I mean, if you take Chiron as a maverick, but how successful is she actually going to be? But we don't have a time of birth. I don't think we can say just on the basis of a flat chart. And it is vice president. It is vice president. Supposedly vice presidents don't matter. So what about the announcement that Robert Kennedy made? I don't know what time the announcement was, but it was sometime on March 26, 2024. I've gone for noon. Remember the chart of Kennedy's announcement of his candidature. The moon was in Libra and the sun was in Aries. We've got the same situation here. We've got moon in Libra, opposition sun. Well, it's after the full moon. I mean, you shouldn't make that kind of announcement just after a full moon. I mean, I know there might have been electoral reasons why there was a bit of a hurry to get it done, but right after a full moon, that's not good. This wouldn't have happened to Ronald Reagan. I'm sure Joan Quigley would have made sure that Ronald Reagan would not have made this kind of announcement with that kind of chart. Where is Joan Quigley when you need her? But the moon is just going to an opposition of Mercury. And Mercury is about to go retrograde. That's terrible. So for an important announcement of his vice presidential pick, he's chosen a really bad day. And another thing to note about this chart is that we're starting to get a Mars-Saturn conjunction coming up. A reminder, of course, that that Kennedy himself has a wide Mars-Saturn conjunction. It's not exact, it's sort of 8 degrees off, but it's still there. And Okay, Mars Saturn is sort of 11 degrees off, but no, it's not a great chart. It does very much indicate, though, Nicole Shanahan, because if you look at the two charts together, so Nicole Shanahan's chart is in the middle, and the announcement is on the outside, and it actually happens on her moon return. Now, we don't know precisely when this moon return is, because we don't know at the moment Shanahan's time of birth, and of course that's another good reason why you shouldn't support Shanahan. That's the problem with Robert Kennedy. These people who don't have a time of birth, you can't vote for people who don't have a time of birth. At least with Biden and Trump, whatever their faults, we've got times of birth. At least you can vote for Biden and Trump, but these people, you just can't vote for them, can you? Moon, so this happened on her lunar return. So yes, it was an important moment for her. She must have really enjoyed the publicity she got having the moon here. But what else? Yeah, moon opposition Mercury on the time of this announcement was bad. And also the moon was just moving into the Via Combusta. So when you've got the moon moving into the Via Combusta, opposition Mercury, well, things can happen. I'm not going to say anything more about this, but I'm just really talking about my first impressions of this pick. I think, given how bad this announcement is, that this pick is, to my mind, I feel it's kind of the end of Robert Kennedy's campaign. I think it's a clear sign that this campaign is not going anywhere. I don't believe that Robert Kennedy is going to make much of an impression. I know people have got excited about him, but I think he chose completely the wrong person. I don't think that she's the right person. I mean, I'm not saying that just on the basis of astrology. She just is not right, and the announcement chart really does illustrate that. That it's a terrible chart. It's not an absolutely super disastrous chart, but it's just not good. And as I said, Nancy Reagan's astrologer, Joan Quigley, she wouldn't have chosen that chart, would she? Okay, that's all I'm going to say. Thank you for listening. I've covered 3 topics in quite superficial detail, and I suppose I have to sort of apologise for my coverage of Nicole Shanahan, because I just didn't really have enough information, but I wanted to say something, and because I didn't have enough information, my own sort of immediate prejudices creeped out. That's not very good. I'm not supposed to do that as an astrologer, but I just didn't have much to work on, and I did want to say something. So yes, thanks for bearing with me. If you enjoyed this video, I would be grateful if you were to press the like button. If you're not subscribed, I would of course be very grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So yes, thanks again for listening, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.